Welcome to the 221st installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's podcast on family farming, sustainable agriculture, local food systems, and local democracy. I'm Brian DeVore, editor of the Land Stewardship Letter. Besides raising crops in the hills of southeastern Minnesota, Bob Mierau also works as a wastewater treatment operator for a neighboring community. Farming is about growing things, and treating municipal wastewater is, in a way, about killing off what can harm us. But a few years ago, Bob had an epiphany of sorts. It occurred to him that just as biology plays a key role in creating the kind of environment that allows him to clean up sewage using good bacteria, building the kind of healthy soil that is self-sustaining also requires biological processes. This has become particularly true to Bob and his wife Greta now that they've transitioned some of their corn and soybean ground to being certified organic. Because they can't rely on chemicals to control weeds and provide fertility on those organic acres, the Mieraus must utilize biological activity to build soil that's self-reliant. They've been doing that by utilizing cover cropping to diversify their fields both above and below ground. But one drawback to organic production is that farmers often have to replace chemical weed control with mechanical tillage. That concerns the Mieraus, given that some of their fields in this part of the driftless region have slopes of up to 30%. Tilling the soil destroys its structure, resulting in erosion as well as the release of carbon. That's why they're looking into ways of creating an organic no-till system. They have plenty of experience with no-till, given that they've been using it on their conventional crop acres for the past 18 years. But how can they integrate such a system into their organic fields? One technique the Mieraus have been experimenting with is a roller crimper, which is basically a large tube that they can roll across a cover crop stand of, say, rye during the spring, bending the stem in such a way that the plants die. This creates a mulch into which a cash row crop can be planted. The mulch suppresses weeds, while the plant material below and above ground feeds the soil's biology. A few years ago, the Mieraus downloaded plans for a roller crimper from the Rodell Institute in Pennsylvania, and, working with a local welder, built one. They, along with some of their neighbors, have been very happy with the results. They found the roller crimper provides excellent weed control, while providing the kind of cover that cuts erosion and builds soil organic matter. Bob and Greta talked about the important role biology plays in their farming operation during a recent Land Stewardship Project Soil Builders Field Day they hosted. Afterwards, Bob and I ducked into a shed during a major rainstorm and discussed how this family is making diversity a key part of their cropping enterprise. Well, one of the things that you had started out talking about, and I've talked to you about this a little bit before, that I think is really an interesting point. You also work in the wastewater treatment business locally here, and that's all about biology. And you've kind of tied that in. That kind of helped you maybe make you a little bit more aware than ever the importance of biology in soil kind of thing. I think that's a really good connection there.
You know, yeah, I have to say that I never had that connection before with soil. And one day, when I left the facility, I think I looked at a flyer from Land Stewardship Project, and it was Understanding Biology, and it was from Lance Gunderson from Kearney, Nebraska, and I thought, biology in the soil. Wow, I haven't been thinking. So I need to go to that conference, and so that's what kind of started that. Is realizing that that the soil beneath our feet really is. It's other than the inert ingredients that are there, it's primarily biological.
And I think it sounds like it's become even more important to you in recent years as you're really looking at how can I build that soil health to the point where, since you are transitioning, you do have organic acres and you're transitioning to organic, that you are really trying to figure out how that soil can build its own fertility and become resistant to pests, that kind of thing? Is it kind of, I guess, become more self-reliant or self-sufficient?
You know, that's one of the key things that I think has really driven me is the fact that I see so many operations, including ours at times, when we feel that there's a recipe in order to get the end product. So we have to add so much of this, and so much of this. And through different studies, one of them that really was really hit home was Elaine Ingham, and how the fact that really everything that we need to grow a crop is in the soil. But learning how to unlock that is really what I'm after. That really is the key, is learning how to unlock all those things to help produce that crop. And not only along with that is we're going to produce a nutrient-dense crop because soil health, human health are so closely related.
So you did a really good job of showing some of the things you are doing to build soil health, and one of them is you've really gotten into these kind of diverse cocktail mixes of cover crops. I'd like you to describe maybe a couple things that you've been doing recently that you've done this year with cover crops, but also another interesting piece that I think really wowed a few people was this, you believe in taking the diversity right into, for example, your cornfield, and you've been doing some interesting things there as well to really kind of, I guess, live that rule that you're trying to live by, which is diversity, diversity, diversity.
This spring, I just had decided that in order to incorporate diversity into there, I felt that, I needed to have at least 3 different species growing, which we have places where there's 10 growing, but I thought at a minimum that's really what I was after, is learning that plants do work together through all their networks. And it's evident with any of the field trials that have been done, the more monocultures we have, the more difficult it becomes to produce any crops. But we find that with whatever we grow, we certainly want to have the soil covered at all times. That's really the key for us, and have a green plant growing at all times, along with minimal disturbance. And at this point, we'd like to incorporate cattle in our operation. We do have our pasture rented out. We are in pursuit and will figure out how to incorporate that into our cropping scheme to make it beneficial at this point. But yes, having that green living plant, a diverse cover, is really our goal here. And it certainly does equate into the food that we eat, how it is all linked together. It's the microbial activity in our gut. This is similar to what's in the soil.
Well, one of the things that I think it may be almost counterintuitive to people is you've really come to believe that plants don't, I think the conventional wisdom is plants always compete with each other for resources, moisture, nutrients and all of that. But you really, through some of the workshops you've been going to and other people you've been talking to and the like, you've really come to believe that there are situations where we can bring them together and they can kind of work in as a team, can kind of work in association with each other and really benefit each other. And I think the example that really struck me was you've got a situation with some corn. I think you're transitioning it to organic, and you actually put in some soybeans, planted some soybeans in there with it. Explain a little bit kind of the thinking behind that, and that totally goes, Midwest, you're supposed to raise corn one year, soybeans the next, completely separate. They are not supposed to be associating with each other, but I saw soybeans in there in that corn road, and what's the thinking behind that, or what were you doing there?
I guess there again, it's the interactions between plants, and so we know corn is a warm season grass. So what better complement to warm season grass than a warm season legume? That way they work together, and that was really what I was trying to promote. Not necessarily that, even if the soybeans went to seed, that's okay with me. They're kind of an annual that's, so in that regard, but I really wanted them plants to work together, and I thought, well, what better way to accomplish even having more nitrogen available? Because keep in mind, the atmosphere we breathe is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. Mm-hmm. In theory, why is that nitrogen not getting in our soil? And it's through the practices that we partake in. And so anything that we can do to replenish that really is my goal. And so through using soybeans, when you pull out that plant, you can see all those nodules on there. You can break them open. You can see the pink color in there. So you know that, hey, I'm fixing nitrogen in the soil. That corn plant is utilizing that. All them interactions, the mycorrhizal fungi that's there, everybody's working together. And that really is what intrigued me. And matter of fact, I wish I would have put in more soybeans to aid the corn in that.
So you feel like that this experiment, you said sometimes you've had some experiments that fail, like any good experimenter, but this one sounds like it's working out pretty good?
Yeah, I will do it again. Mm-hmm. I will certainly put corn or beans with corn again this next year. I probably will up my rate a little bit more. I'd like to see a little bit more greenery underneath. And not only that, if we think about that, So even early on in the season, you really want to capture that solar energy that's coming, and you do that through the different heights and leaf structures of all them plants. And what better way to capture that sunlight through different plants and different areas of the field. And so that's where even incorporating red clover, or maybe it's Kira clover or some sorts of clovers, not in real high rates, but also just having those available there. Those are all a warm season legume.
Well, that reminds me of something else you had talked about. Was you have been doing the Haney soil test, which is this kind of comprehensive test. It's not like just testing the traditional test of testing your N, P, and K. You're looking at the overall biology that's kind of going on with your soil there, and it sounds like you've been seeing some pretty positive results as far as your organic matter. But the one thing you pointed out was it can help you really pinpoint exactly how much nitrogen, for example, is available, whereas the traditional soil test undermeasures that, so that you're tempted maybe to add more nitrogen than the crop really needs. But I think you quoted like some differences there. It was almost like double, I think, or something. But talk about that differences that you saw with that test.
So a couple of things within the Haney test is they call it the Sovita test, which is the respiration rate of the microbes in the soil, and that's really one piece of that puzzle. Now, there's a lot of pieces, and that's one of them that I look at. And the Haney test, for example, I used on a field a year or so ago on a conventional field. I sent my sample in. The respiration came back at about 80 parts per million. Mm-hmm. And so this year, this is not the same field, but on a similar area that's had covers and plants growing the last 2 years, it's not been tilled. That respiration is 240. So it's several times higher. And not only that, we're building the natural products of potash, which is plant material, unlocking phosphorus that's in the soil to aid the following crop. And, along with that, nitrogen, which is attached right to carbon, as carbon increases, so does nitrogen. So as days go by and plants mature, and that's really what I'm after, is not to put any fertilizer on those particular crops. Now, is that always the case? Not necessarily, but we're working in the right direction. And that cost savings, the Haney test is not what I would say inexpensive, but you can do it on a larger area, and it gives you a lot better idea of a gauge of where your soil health is at. Mm-hmm. With that, compared to the traditional soil test, it will show you, a definite cost benefit, which maybe you want to use that to help promote another soil health practice on the farm. And it really was free, in essence. Plus, you got the benefit of building carbon, which is really equal to resilience, right, in my mind.
You also face, as an organic farmer, the bugaboo that a lot of organic farmers face, which is, since they can't rely on chemicals to control weeds, they're relying on tillage. And that sounds like it really bothers you, and I guess I'd like you to talk about why that bothers you, but then talk about what the thing you've been experimenting with, the roller crimper and the like, that you've been experimenting with to try to get away from that. And you said you made it clear your goal is to someday be using no-till organic, which is like the brass ring. That's what a lot of people are after with this system, where you're combining the chemical-free, building the organic biology of the soil, but also you're not exposing that soil to tillage.
What I'm really after is to balance that carbon to nitrogen ratio. Like I had mentioned, the microbes in the soil are an 8-to-1 ratio, 8 carbon, 1 nitrogen. They're going to consume up to 16 parts of carbon just through respiration. That's their diet, just like our diet. My whole goal is actually to till with plants. So whether that's radish or turnips, or just having a diverse, and I mean that in different levels of root systems in there, but also keep in mind that we're trying to manage that microbial mass so that we can grow that microbial mass, yet not disturb it. Because as soon as we disturb that through maybe it's a chemical application, which there's a lot of unknowns about the chemical applications at this point, but through the physical disturbance, we really burn the house down with carbon. And so a lot of energy went in to grow that, and we took it away real quick because it was a vision that we thought we needed to have a clean crop. Mm-hmm. The eyesight that I guess I'm trying to show is that you can really grow and have a successful crop, not necessarily look perfect in the field, but knowing that it's a healthy crop and that your microbes are fed in the soil and stay in business and be able to weather the big rain events and all these almost unnatural events that are happening. They're so severe. And so that's really the whole intent, is to be able to build resilience in our operation through the function of plants and what they do and how we understand them.
And so one of the things you're doing is you have built this roller crimper.
So our journey started with meeting Jeff Moyer from the Rodale Institute and him actually having some success with organic no-till. And it was just a mere discovery that they happened to drive some rye down and in a field, and it just made this huge mulch, and there was some beans in there, and they came up and they didn't have any weed pressure. And so at that point, that's when I think Jeff had decided that we need to come up with a way to crimp rye. We can do any crop when it's in its vulnerable stage of making seed, or right prior to seed making. And so that really interested me, and from that point on, through his work, they developed the roller crimper, which basically is a large tube that has paddles that are tipped a certain angle, rolled around around the tube, that really, in essence, just you can roll it down the field just like a big log, and it'll roll that crop over, and it will not necessarily cut the stems of rye off or whatever crop you want to roll, but actually crimp the stem so that it terminates the crop. Mm-hmm. And you can do it with many crops. They've had a lot of success. Now that's in monocultures, but it does work well. And so at that point, Greta and I decided that was something that we would like to experiment with, and we thought we could maybe try and build one. There's some locals that certainly aided with that. So we got the plans from Rodale Institute out in Pennsylvania, and I shared them with our local welder in Mabel, Minnesota. And from that point on, it was all put together and it was tried out back in 2016. I thought it was a very successful crop. Had very little weed pressure, had a great mat covering the soil. Biology, all the critters, spiders, mites, all that stuff were having a heyday under there, and the beans came up right up through, and it was a beautiful crop, and it worked really well. We didn't have to spray any chemicals to control anything, so we felt we were working with nature.
What was the process and when you planted the crop and everything?
The rye would have been planted at about, I think it was September 13th. In 15, and then that was planted at about 3 bushels to the acre, maybe just a touch over 3 bushels per acre. And then the anthesis stage, which comes in this area around the 1st of June, was when it was rolled down. And from that point, I think I had mentioned we had a windstorm. It blew a lot of it down. I grew impatient. I decided, I need to plant it today. And so I just went ahead and rolled it. It was in anthesis stage. It was just starting. So I went ahead and rolled it down. And then I planted soybeans in that crop at about 185,000 seeds per acre. You had to go slow. And most of the beans got in the ground, and there was some that even laid on top of the ground or in the rye. But them seeds stay nice and cool and damp. Mm-hmm. And even though they didn't necessarily make it into the soil, they still germinated and came up through. Mm-hmm. So, and we harvested that crop near the end of October that year, and I think we averaged around 50 bushel to the acre. We were happy with that. It was an organic trial. We felt we captured a good premium for them. Beans went well. We thought it was enough success that this next year we're going to try organic no-till corn with some hairy vetch and rye, and then obviously a mix of covers. I think we had 9 different species of covers mixed in there at real light rates. just to give some diversity. Some will overwinter, some will not. But at least our goal is to have that diversity and hope elude any problems in the spring. But then again, that's our plan.
Would you roll then? You'd roll it and implant the corn?
Yes.
Is that how you do that?
That's correct, yep. It should go the same way. To roll it down 15 feet, it's a 6-row, 30-inch. Yeah, we'll roll it down and follow right behind. The only thing is, it's going to be really hard to see maybe where we can see the 15 feet, but we won't always see. So I'm thinking about maybe I need to make a foam marker for the center of the corn row on the marker. At least that way I can at least stay close. Yeah. Try and keep my rows, close and symmetrical as possible. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I love that idea. You're protecting the soil, the surface, which is particularly important on these hilly acres, but you're also not burning up that carbon by exposing it, like you said, burning the house down by exposing that soil, and you're building it in the long term. It sounds like you're kind of getting, several things at once with that, using that kind of living mulch type system.
That living mulch system, it's just similar to our skin, and it really is the protection barrier from all the critters out there that cause disease. And so if we can keep that there, that level of protection is really our goal here.
For more on the Land Stewardship Project's work related to soil health, see the Soil Builders page at landstewardshipproject.org. There, you'll find resources and videos, as well as other podcasts featuring farmers and others who are working to build soil health profitably. If you have comments or suggestions about this podcast, contact Brian DeVore at bdevore at landstewardshipproject.org, or you can call 612-722-6377. Thanks to Laura Borgendale, a Western Minnesota musician, for Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member, visit landstewardshipproject.org to learn how you can support LSP. Thanks for listening.